lecture, teaching class, as we say, and it's just going to talk about some important imaging modalities for the retina. Because as you can understand, imaging has undergone a major revolution for retina. Things we never expected to see, we are now seeing, and in great detail with multimodal imaging, because we kind of connect up the OCT, OCTA with the color picture and with the ICG wherever required. So we get a composite images which we study with the residents and me. We all study together and we try to interpret what we see from the patient's history and the imaging put together. So history and the clinical examination does not still takes precedence and has the maximum value. But good imaging done and most important, interpreting the images are very useful, because until you don't interpret images, you will be, actually you won't know what you're actually seeing. The scan would just be a scan to you. So this thick, high refractivity band is something which you should definitely be able to see, and at every visit, this band should be seen, whether it's continuous, discontinuous, or totally broken, whatever. This is called ellipsoid band. And the thing is, the ellipsoid band has great value in the visual recovery, and it's formed by the outer inner segments of the photoreceptors, possibly the mitochondria. It was previously called the ISOS junction, and the other bands are also there. The other layers of the retina are there. There's a IZ below it, or external to it is the interdigitation zone, and near the RP. But nothing is more important than the EZ. So if you want to study the retinal OCT images, which you should be knowing very well, that just seeing the OCT image as it is would lead to no information from that. You've got to go down to, it's kind of a cellular picture. It's like a histopathology of the retina. So you must see what's the interface like. What's the interface? Is the dip present, absent? Is there some vitreoretinal adhesion? And there's a dynamic focus which helps you to see the vitreoretinal interface in some of the OCTA machines. And the contour, the foveal contour, whether it's the shape of a dip, and is the picture intact? Are the layers visible? Or there's a disorganization of the layers, or there's some cystic spaces, or there's some other things in the retina, some hyperreflective dots are present over there. So all those things have to be seen within the architecture. Then go on to the outer bands, which I told you. The ELM is there, and then the EZ, and then you have the IZ, and then you have the RP, and then of course the choroid. Now the choroid study is also very important. So we tend to ignore the choroid because the retina is seen, but one says it's enough. That's actually not enough. The choroid is to be seen very carefully. Many of the retinal diseases have affection of the choroid, and recovery depends on the choroid regaining its normal thickness. Talk a little bit about what's the thickness and when is the choroid affected, and what kind of diseases can we expect to study the choroid. So this is G2 ERM with a thick ERM over there, and you'll see the dip is lost, the cystic spaces. The patients, you see over here by marked with the red arrow, is the ellipsoid band is discontinuous. This is a stage when the patient's losing vision because his traction and the pull on the macula has caused the ellipsoid band to get discontinuous. And so he's in a shape where not only his vision and distortion, the metamorphopsia is subjective findings of metamorphopsia, the objective findings of ellipsoid band getting discontinuous, again highlighted in red. The EZ gets affected in DME, RD, ERM, ARMD, RVO, central serous choroidal. So literally so many of these diseases, maybe some more are not listed, but in highlighted in red, as a matter of caution, the EZ should be seen. Even in macular holes, you see the recovery. The other day, a patient had come on Wednesday, and the recovery is not good. So I discussed with the resident, and we actually saw that the EZ has not recovered. It is totally discontinuous in the center. The holes closed beautifully. So it was something like the hole is closed, vision has not recovered. So why? Because the EZ is discontinuous. And for the EZ to get continuous after such successful closure takes a few weeks to months. you will always see that after the subsequent serious OCT, after say a month, the EZ becomes less discontinuous. The space between the two gaps is reduced. Similar way, you see these vitreomacular tractions often with diabetes, retinopathy. The gel tends to adhere to the center abnormally and pulls the retina upwards anteriorly and finally breaks the macula here and causes a hole. This is the normal life of a hole formation, the normal sequence of events. The VMT occurs first, the VMA first, which is very mild, and it's actually the vitreous which is pulled up but not at the fovea. It's attached at the fovea, but it's very gentle pull. The tip may be maintained. So VMA is vitreomacular adhesion is not to be touched. But when you go to VMT, which is a severe form of VMA, then you may have to intervene because see the internal architecture again. Those four questions. See the internal architecture very badly affected. In fact, the outer lamellar hole. This is the outer lamellar hole. This is the inner hole, and you can join up to form a hole. So actually, the hole is just about to form. If this just gives way, there is a full hole over here. So you're kind of operating just before the impediment. It's maybe the next few days to months, weeks, there will be a complete hole. So you operate at this stage, or you want to wait till the hole forms. That's a different thing, but I would like to wait. So diabetic VMT we see so often. I think tomorrow I posted one. So it's so common. So this kind of a picture you get on fundus picture, fundus imaging must have a fundus picture. There's cystic spaces in a 22-year-old male, 624 parts ODUS. Please don't write right and left. Write ODUS. Bilaterally symmetrical cystic spaces in a young male or a female. Male basically X-linked. And you see these cystic spaces and the schisis, the splitting of the retina. It's an X-linked retinoschisis. So you should think in such terms of these hereditary inherited retinal disorders, IRD patients. But whenever you see a bilaterally symmetrical lesion, start looking at the macula more carefully. You see these bilateral symmetrical, often X-linked retinoschisis is there, and you should normally don't do anything for it. Some people say give Damox, dorzolamide drops, some say even do surgery. But surgery is definitely not advocated, but you can give some dorzolamide drops to pump out the fluid. But there's no traction as such on these cases. It's an inherited condition. So from I just want to tell you that the spectral domain OCT, the light source was superluminescent diodes. And that's been replaced by a laser, a short cavity laser. So the advantage of the surface OCT, it overcomes the scattering by the RP, so you can go into the choroid. So the surface OCT images the choroid very well. Along with the interface, vitreoretinal interface, the retina, the outer band including the ellipsoid, the RP and the choroid. At the same time, you get starting from the vitreous to the choroid, everything is visible. So that's a big advantage of the surface OCT. It's got a longer wavelength, you all know it, and it's got number of scans per second can be even 400,000 per second. So 100,000 you've heard of, but what is being taught is that the scanning speed is extremely high, produce very high resolution pictures. So this is a patient with the submacular, with a PD, kind of with a lot of SRHM, subretinal hyperreflective material. I'll tell you a little bit about that. So it's 100,000 scans, but actually it's going up more than that. Very clean scans. Very elevated lesion in the macula, the 55-year-old male, 10 days history of little drop in vision. It's a little, ICG is not showing us much, some branching vascular network here, so the ICG is not giving us much information. So what we get information is from the OCT and the OCTA. The OCT shows us the notched bifid PED, RPED, and serous detachment, and above the RPED, the serous fluid, and we have got some exudative fluid, which is actually subretinal hyperreflective material, SHRM. Subretinal hyperreflective material actually means the patient, if it is present, has a little poorer prognosis because they are associated with scarring in the eventual future. So this can be present in AMD as well as in PCV, aging macula. So whenever you see this kind of a material over here, which is a little translucent, opaque looking, unlike a clear fluid here. So that indicates is SHRM. So a notch PD, very classical of PCV. There's some subretinal fluid here and there. So you got to inject, but there's a possibility of scarring, which you can always discuss with the patient that he won't know what is SHRM, but he can definitely know what is scarring. So the fact that SHRM is there, that is for you to know. So this is probably the neovascular membrane which is there on the OCTA or the OCTA. I like to call it OCTA. So this tells us some little hyperreflective material is actually a biomarker for with more chance of foveal scarring, correlates with poorer visual acuity. So this is another lesion which you've seen so commonly, and is a little pale with some hyperpigmentation in the venules dipping down. And this is a neurodegenerative condition. It's not actually a vascular abnormality. It's a neurodegenerative condition. The retina and the macula, the fovea gets degenerated. And then there's a loss of tissue. The loss of tissue, you get cavitation. You don't get cystic spaces. No fluid is over there. There's no fluid. So loss of tissue leading to cavitation and maybe a ILM drape sign where the entire retinal fovea, the entire retina is lost, only the ILM is left. So that's a very severe form of macular telangiectasia. Usually the type 2 is more common, which is bilateral. Type 1 is unilateral, and they often associated with diabetic patients. And you can have a secondary CNM, which is quite common. And so this is one condition where the OCTA or the OCTA is of great help. Great help. Pick up the neovascular membrane and then we inject. Otherwise, you just see this. So it's most common, and there's a disruption of pericytes and neurodegenerative conditions, usually temporal. So this is all these inflammatory lesions also. You can do multimodal imaging. You can do OCT, OCTA, OCT, FA, and color picture. So multimodal imaging tells you there's some scar over there, probably a scar of some choroiditis patch or infectious choroiditis patch with some hemorrhage. So whenever you see unexplained hemorrhage at the macula, even in a traumatic scar yesterday I saw. So patient had a traumatic scar, but he had hemorrhages. So when he's got hemorrhages near a traumatic scar, which is sclerotinia was there, that could harbor a CNVM. And just like you get in Brooks membrane rupture. So this is actually the leaking area, and this hemorrhage, probably this leaking area, but the FA kind of obscures the details of the vascular network. The normal vascular network, because of the dye leaking out, it doesn't give us very clearly where exactly is the vascular network. Can we measure the size of the vascular network? Not possible. So OCT does tell us the architecture is badly affected, the dip is lost just a little bit. So you got this neovascular membrane over here, and that's what the OCTA tells you everything. The entire vascular network is visible. So you got this vascular network here. Here it's minimal, but main thing is this huge network can be marked, measured, and anti-VEGF given, and then re-measured. But then it takes little time and effort. So this is another case, very interesting. So bilateral symmetrical lesions, which yolk side, sunny yolk side up, and so there was some neovascular membrane over here on the yellow arrow pointing a little towards upward, but this is the neovascular membrane. So this is a patient who had very good vision. And actually best macular degeneration or vitelliform macular dystrophy is young patients. And they often don't notice they have any problem until they drop vision because of the CNV. The CNV. So CNV occurs in the best, they'll come running to a doctor that my vision has dropped in one eye. With the best vitelliform dystrophy, he had a vision of 6/6 in his left eye. It's the right eye which developed the CNV. It's the right eye, and that's why he came running. And there's probably the CNV over here, hyperreflective dot. It's a subretinal. This is some vitelliform material. So this is probably the CNV which is developed. So this is, you can see the abnormal vasculature over here. So we injected and the patient did improve vision. So you can expect CNV occurring even in degenerative conditions, inflammatory conditions, idiopathic, myopic, age-related macular degeneration, PCV. So this is another lesion which I feel multimodal imaging has a great value, especially OCT tells you exactly what is the status of the macula. This is a fever case where the retina appears a little dragged, the peripheral is a fibrovascular growth which is leaking on wide field imaging. And actually, when we did the OCT, we found to our surprise there's a hole and there was schisis. So the retina, instead of when it got pulled, it actually split the retina. So what we had to do is we had to peel from the top, from the surface, little ILM peeling extensive. If there's a ERM, any stretch, epiretinal stretch was tried, we put dye and removed as far as we could, because we had to remove this stretch and also the close the hole. So we had double duty of putting inverted flaps, plus removing the stretch. And actually, we spent a little extra time for the surgery with the buckle also, because these cases have a very severe traction in the periphery. You have to put a belt buckle. So after the belt buckle, the retina's on, and she's being on long follow-up now, comes rarely. So now she's doing well. So DSM is another condition where the OCT helps you a lot. And here you can see these myopics. High myopics often have a DSM is a dome-shaped macula. It's usually under the fovea. So what's the primary pathology lie in DSM? So what complications occur with DSM? Differential diagnosis. It's a thickening of the subfoveal macula. It's usually seen in patients with high myopes and staphylomas. You could have rarely subretinal fluid macular holes or a CNV. Differential diagnosis, central serous choroidal retinopathy. B-dump is something where it's a paraneoplastic syndrome, and you should know that you get pigmentation all over the melanocytes, proliferate from the UVA and the RP, and they form huge clumps on the retina. So this is an indirect evidence the patient's got visceral carcinoma. So paraneoplastic affection of the retina usually means there is a carcinomatous pathology either in the breast, lungs, or in the viscera. For B-dump, they say it's usually visceral carcinoma. So whenever you have these kind of pictures, whether vessels are sheaths or very thin, and there's irregular pigmentation, the retina looks degenerated, or you got these multiple pigmentary changes, which actually represent a T cell response, autoimmune response due to the malignancy, or it can differentiate to the choroidal hemangioma. This is a condition where the DSM is not on the fovea, it's a very severe myopic patient. We see so many of them. So the Swepso's OCTA, the Swepso's OCT showed us the dome-shaped macula away from the fovea. And in between, you see the choroidal cleft. So choroidal clefts have also been described, and one should note them. They don't know why this occur, but whether they contain fluid, or is it because of the pull upwards that the choroid gets fractured. And what's the significance of these clefts? They said in future we may know something more about it and how to, would it help treating it, in what way should we treat it. So these patients have early MTM also. So they've got all the pathological myopic changes. But this cleft, water cleft or interchoroidal cavitation is now being noticed and being reported and being discussed in international meetings. Our national webinars are mostly political, so I can't say much about them. This is another choroidal cavitation in a myopic patient. See, the myopic patient always is a steep slope ending into the globe, because it's not the globe is kind of steep backwards, like a cone, and you can have a posterior staphyloma. So it's a steep slope. The fovea lies on the slope, and below that fovea, the actual staphyloma which is there on one side of the fovea is showing a cleft, which is an anterior, there's a posterior choroidal cleft. So somebody is going to do that, classify clefts and try to do something about that. So this is another condition where you can have, multiple reddish colored elevations. When you have one, the fovea itself, so often we see macular hemangiomas, but just temporal lobes. There's no specific areas. Hemangiomas, you can have this hemangioma and this is very good sound transmission with some fluid, and this is cystic fluid over it. And so you can, ideal treatment for hemangioma is photodynamic therapy. But in the absence of the dye not being available, it's very sad that we can't treat them so well. You could probably give an anti-VEGF, but the ideal treatment, finite treatment, so they don't keep on recurring again and again. We've got many patients where we actually give double dose or double duration. Because 83 seconds is the normal duration for a single dose PDT treatment. Infusion. So you give a 5-minute infusion of ibuprofen, 10 minutes you wait for the dye to accumulate in the hemangioma. And then after 15 minutes, you give a 689 nanometer laser, you give a 83-second exposure, millisecond exposure. And the PDT does wonders on hemangioma. Like it does wonders for chronic CSC. I'm telling you. So unfortunately, even subthreshold laser for such a large lesion, I don't think it's possible. But don't do thermal laser, I don't think so. But one can give an anti-VEGF and hope for the best. This is another choroidal hemangioma. Choroidal osteoma, the cancellous bone is there. And this is choroidal metastasis, also elevation. So you have to rule out this irregular, lumpy, bumpy appearance on the OCT. The whole choroid is lumpy and bumpy. So there's a totally dark hypofluorescence, jet black hypofluorescence, 102 degrees, which is also white field on the Heidelberg system. And this is, of course, you all know this is SHRM, so SRHM, subretinal hyperreflective material with a PD, which is suggestive of a PCV lesion, and it's got some macular bleed and some branching vascular network. The polyps probably are not so clearly visible. So this is a very important condition which now we are seeing more often, because these patients come to us with sudden onset scotoma, and the scotoma, they don't know what. There's very good health, no hypertension, nothing. I remember one of our patients said that he's got all his tests done. So actually there's ischemia under the center of the fovea, paracentral ischemia. There's a flow, shows there's a lack of blood flow in this area. There's a field effect also. The macula gets atrophic. The middle layers get hyperreflective. The middle layers of the retina. You see, this is hyper-reflective, opaque looking, unlike these rest. So this means there is some vascular insufficiency, some vascular pathology. So this is called PAM, or PAM stands for, what does PAM stand for? PAM stands for paracentral acute middle maculopathy. It's a middle macula which gets affected, the central macula. The outer nuclear layer and all get affected, and you get capillary ischemia. Scotomas can be there, but actually there is no treatment for it. There's some viral prodrome or some oral contraceptives or some other which may cause it. And recently we saw one patient, which I just want to show the next picture. So there's no treatment for this. Prognosis is a little guarded to poor. So this is a patient we saw recently. There's a 47-year-old male who came from Punjab, and he had referred DOV left, and right. The history of COVID exposure, his mother had very severe COVID, which she passed away, and he himself didn't have it. He said he's got central vision disturbance, and he had a petaloid appearance in the center, the bilaterally present. The petaloid was more obvious. This is just a few days back, 2 weeks back. So the typical petaloid appearance you get with the CME, Irvine gas syndrome, or this. Actually, acute macular neuroretinitis. We searched the literature. So probably it's acute macular neuroretinitis. If the picture is akin to this, you get a petaloid appearance, and the outer retina is affected. The most important layer to get affected is the photoreceptors. AMN or PAM are of the same family. AMN is a deeper form of PAM. So what you get is a photoreceptor affection. The photoreceptors get severely affected, and you may actually lose vision because of the photoreceptors getting affected. Again, there is no vascular etiology. There's probably some prodromal fever or something. Here we thought probably COVID, The COVID virus and the could have caused it. We're not sure, but probably the SRs are writing up this case, and I hope they write it up before I leave. And this is a case of HIV retinitis. You can see the necrotic retina on the OCT. I was shocked to see there's no retina. Absolutely no retina. So badly necrotic. So this is a very nice case from the point of view of teaching. Multiple white dots, hyperfluorescent, multiple, like a white dot syndrome. Okay. And there is a elevated serous detachment over here. Okay. And there is some irregular hypoflow regions here. So anyway, the OCT shows the maximum findings here. Thickened choroid, I go backwards. The choroid is important. You got a serous detachment with septate serous detachment. A septate serous detachment with thickened choroid. First possibility is Voh-Koyanagi-Harada syndrome. Sorry. Voh-Koyanagi-Harada syndrome. PKH. You put the patient on immunosuppressive steroids, he'll improve, she will improve, but they may have uveal signs, some stiffness, but often it may not be so significant. The patient also doesn't notice stiffness, meningism. It's part of the family of uveomeningeal syndromes. Sympathetic ophthalmia and VKH form the three triad of diseases under the uveomeningeal syndrome. This is part of the uveomeningeal syndrome. You should know these conditions. You don't have to know uvea specially to know all this. It's all part of retina. So this is another patient of DME. You can see there's a ORT, outer retinal tubulation. This is a neurodegeneration. The hyperreflective border, and there's ORT here also. So whole architecture is affected. This is a little VMA, and look at the ellipsoid. It's a little disrupted here. So we gave some Ozurdex, and of course the ellipsoid looks a little better, healthier, but the ORT still stays. The ORT is actually a degenerative material of the photoreceptors and all. It won't go. This is called hyperreflective foci, HRF. These hyperreflective foci are signs of inflammation. This is not neurodegeneration. ORT is neurodegeneration. This is a sign of inflammation. There is inflammation in diabetic retinopathy. There is inflammation in neovascular AMD. So this is inflammation. So multiple factors which play a role. So you should know at the cellular level what all is occurring. This is the hyperreflective foci. They may reduce with the anti-VEGFs, but of course you give Ozurdex, they still look quite many of them. Okay, so hyperreflective foci aggregates of activated microglial cells in DME, and with anti-VEGFs and steroids, there's a reduction, but here we didn't see any reduction, confirming a hyperreflective foci as an inflammatory marker. But ORT is also a biomarker, and DRIL is also a biomarker, and HRF is also a biomarker. But they all have different significances. So a lot of biomarkers in diabetic retinopathy. SR AMD. There where it tells you the thick, opaque looking material which is there actually predisposes to scarring. So the various biomarkers which are now being understood. You should understand this. Talk about the biomarkers when you see OCT. So OCT-A, I'll come to the last part of this is, what's the time? Half an hour. So OCT-A is a functional extension of the OCT. So basically performs repeated B scans to detect motion, contrast, and motion change in the motion. The motion contrast will visualize the vasculature. There's very high speed of B scans which are taken, which detect the motion of the inherent RBCs which are there in the blood flow. So stationary objects won't produce any change from one image to another, but moving objects like RBCs will produce a lot of change in the image. So if you got a pathology, that also is shown up, and the net is to visualize the blood flow. The net expected result is to visualize the blood flow, which is the basis of OCT. OCT does not have the biggest advantage. It does not require any injectable material like dye or anything else. And we performed it. Any patient is a patient walking and he says, "I want my retina checked." get the OCTA done. But FA-ICG require a lot of preparation, and also it may have some side effects in the sense it can be very severe reaction. Patients have to be fully dilated. Because the present SLO systems and the TopCon also without an SLO system, you can do without dilatation also. So it's very quick to do. So like the workflow in a OPD is really smoothened out with OCT and OCTA. With OCT and OCTA, the workflow is smooth. Surgeon friendly, surgeon means ophthalmologist friendly, optometrist friendly. The FA-ICG is a lot of messy with risks of causing some counter or some extravasation or some nausea and also problems. And actually, a lot of information can be achieved and taken from the OCT, OCTA in diabetic retinopathy, in AMD, neovascular AMD, PCV, in so many conditions, vascular occlusions, that you don't need FA-ICG until you really want to do it. Okay, you can do it because it's a baseline. But after that, for serial follow-ups, you may not do a fluorescein ICG. I'm not against FA-ICG. I still think it was a basic imaging modality for many, many years. For 40 years, we lived on FA only. Then ICG came. Again, the ICG went out. But we lived on FA only. Then suddenly in 2000s, the OCT came. Then the OCTA came. And so all these things have come in and they've really improved. Wide field imaging came. So that's improved things. The chronic CSC patient, and in February 2020, in follow-up, he's developed some neovascular membrane. So that time his Octa was absolutely okay. That time he had CSR only, but intraretinal cystic fluid also. But you see this, this is the AF, autofluorescent image. You can see the fluid tracks of the CSC. The fluid tracks of the CSC. Some subretinal fluid is there. Okay, some intraretinal cystic fluid is there. Though in CSC you basically get subretinal fluid. Okay. And there's a little bit of thickening of the choroid. The halar layer is getting dilated. The halar's layer. So this fluid tracks everything. The multimodality imaging in 2020 showed us that this patient had probably CSC with a lot of chronic CSC with fluid tracks. But when he came in follow-up on 20th of July, February to July, he actually developed the same elevation which was there, a PD which was there. He developed a huge membrane. So he actually got into this thing. Proper from CSC, the other end of the spectrum of pachychoroid disease. Pachychoroid disease has CSC, and the other end is pachychoroid choroidal vasculopathy, and he's developed a neovascular membrane. And this, based on OCTA, I would like to inject this patient because this OCTA shows a large membrane, and when you see such a large membrane, it may be justified to inject this patient, and his symptoms, his metamorphosis will reduce, and there are less chances of bleeding because PCV patients tend to bleed more than neovascular AMD. So this is a patient we had LASIK done. So many of the myopes do have LASIK or some procedure done. So he had a myopic CNV, the axial length was high, and there was a history of CA breast, of not a metastasis. There's a small elevated mass in the subretinal space with the retina lifted over it. So the OCTA showed us the neovascular membrane. So when you see this neovascular membrane, you think that it's this kind of a picture, then you would like to inject. And even the fluorescein shows the leaking CNVM. So sometimes when the OCT shows you the neovascular membrane, you may not do the FA. Because the FA is going to give you no information about the vascular pattern. It just shows you some leakage, hyperfluorescence or hypofluorescence, which I think is quite crudish. But if you can show the exact vascular abnormality and size, you know the exact pathology more clearly. And then you can compare this present picture with the subsequent one at 1 month or treat and extend at 6 weeks. I prefer treat and extend rather than fixed dosing of PRN. So here you see another patient with a polypoidal choroidal vasculopathy. The polyp is beautifully seen, large polyp. The stippled fluorescence, and some hemorrhage around it, block fluorescence. And so you can see the huge polyp on ICG. This was an FA, but this is one place where the ICG really helped us with a large, like a giant polyp. And this giant polyp actually corresponded to the thumb shaped PD, with a double layer sign and with a subretinal fluid. This is all signs, thumb shaped PD, double layer sign, subretinal fluid, all signs. Very, very classical and pathognomonic of a polypoidal choroidal vasculopathy. So see the polyp, though it's a low flow lesion, in presence of a high flow, this thing, BBN, it still shows. So, like I said, everything fast flowing does show up on Octa, but here the polyp was probably so large it had some circulation of fluid inside. So, rarely do you pick up polyps on Octa. So, polyp, if you want to pick up, you will have to go to ICG. So, if you want to pick up normal vessels, Octa is fine. But if you want to pick up a polyp, probably it's better to do an ICG. So, there in between, you may need to do a ICG after 3 to 4 months. Because if you see polyps, that means very active PCV, and such an active PCV, then you need to inject. Because I said they may burst. They have terminal endings of the choroidal vessels and they burst, and they may cause us, patient comes with a submacular bleed. And then other day we saw myopic CME with a massive bleed. So patients with all these choroidal membranes tend to bleed. So PCV is another patient with multiple cluster of grape-like polyps. And this is classical with the multiple PDs. Diabetics, you will see the FA hypofluorescence gets mapped out very well on Octa, and the OCT tells you the exact cystic fluid presence of the ORT. So patients lost his structure of the he's got a certain degree of drill also. Hyperrefractive foci, ORT, and he's got this ORT. So you all know hyperrefractive foci don't shadow. Unlike the exudates which have a shadowing, they're tinier, they don't create a shadow. So this can be replaced, but probably FA in between months and 6 months, and at baseline definitely, and in between we get to OCT. One thing I've seen that the laser spots are not seen on Octa very clearly. So, but if you want to see the laser spots, you may need a. So, get the AF done, see the laser spots, then do the Octa. Both are non-invasive, because see here the laser spots are not visible, but the FA actually shows everything. It shows the neovascular network, but it shows the laser spots. Here it appears as if everything is non-perfusion, but it's actually not true. So you should get the AF quickly, and then from the AF you can do the OCT. So you've got to sort of move from machine to machine, but to get up multiple images, it takes a little time. But if you're doing a non-invasive, smooth flow. So this is also very severe diabetic retinopathy. FA shows a very severe, hardly any the wide field imaging. Though the retina doesn't look too bad, little bit of macular atrophy and some neovascular network here, but you can see that the patient's got ischemia, but you don't know whether laser or not, but the FA tells you there is. So actually they combine with each other. So it's got, it's non-invasive, faster quantitative analysis of the retinal blood vessels, 3D imaging, and non-invasive. You can see the choroidal microvascular OCT increasingly used. It's got some limitations really about leakage, projection, a lot of artifacts, projection artifact, motion artifact, segmentation artifact. So motion is head movement, eye movement. Projection artifact is when the superficial vessels get projected onto the retina, the back, the RP. So you have to know those. And slow flow abnormality, I told you, maybe microisms may not picked up, or polyps. It's got a smaller imaging area because people are coming in with more wider. 15 to 15 is there, but people are coming in with a wider, wide field. Everything is wide field now. Choroidal imaging also, it's important. Choroidal imaging, the PCV, see dilated Haller's layer, which you all know. And these are patient who was actually CSC and by accident got treated with methylprednisolone, thinking it was VKH. VKH pictures also, I told you the multiple leaks. And sometimes somebody not very, sure about what it is, probably gave IV methylprednisolone in the case of CSC, CSU will give steroids like this, IV methylprednisolone, that's the end of his eye. He's going to be disaster. It's going to be disaster will strike. The patient will lose all his eye vision because the whole exudative RD will occur, and it will take time for it to settle. God knows how much vision you get. So never ever give steroids in a patient of CSU. Vice versa, if there is a patient of VKH, please do not withhold steroids. So there are two diseases which can be confuse each other. You've got to know the theory, you've got to know the practical aspects, you've got to know the clinical features, and then based on the multimodal imaging, then treat with steroids or without. VKH, you require heavy dose steroids, heavy immunosuppressors. For CSE, no steroids. Counseling for better sleep, treat his sleep apnea, etc., and personality changes, lifestyle changes play a big role. Probably you need to do PDT with the 3 months old. Otherwise, you just wait. You can give Eplerenone, which is a spironolactone inhibitor, which helps to reduce the fluid in the subretinal space. This is a limited treatment. You can start at 25 BD, but then go to 50, get some potassium. But with Eplerenone, which is a selective beta 2 type, this thing, spironolactone antagonist, so you don't need it. So this is a patient who came with this kind of a picture. 82 years, lady the other day. Very fresh picture. ICG picture. Anyone of you wants to speak? You're there, all of you, can you speak back?
Yes, sir.
Yes, afternoon, sir. Who's that?
Abhijit, sir. Abhijit Bengal.
Can we have some junior resident speak?
Yes, sir. Sir,
Can they introduce yourself? Agam. Agam.
Sir, this on ICG, this appears to be polyps suggestive of polypoidal choroidal vasculopathy.
Is the location central?
No, sir. Paracentral. Sir,
Or periphery?
near the posterior pole. Yes, sir.
Periphery. Agam, periphery.
Yes, yes, sir. Periphery. Yes, sir. Periphery. Then it can be, sir, PEHCR.
That's it.
Periphery.
You hit the nail on the head.
Yes.
It's peripheral exudative cororetinal. Yeah. So it's called PHCR. This is a variant of PCV in the periphery. So you're going to give anterior multiple polyps. So ICG picked it up. So sir, polyps are only picked up by ICG. Even FA will not pick it up. So ICG shows a huge number of polyps and this hemorrhage over there is a peripheral PCV, which is called PEHCR, peripheral exudative hemorrhagic chororetinopathy. So this is, of course, what is it? Of course, this is CME retinitis. Chalo. Where is the choroid thickest? GR. Where is the choroid thickest? Which GR wants to answer this? One of you? Rack your brains. Nobody? What is normal subfoveal choroidal thickness?
300 nanometers.
Yeah, a little less than that, 275. What are the risk factors to develop pachychoroid? Chalo. So, choroid is thickest at the subfoveal region, and it's 300 microns. Median thickness is about 270. So you're right. And risk factor to develop pachychoroid from CSC to even we have shown in our literature. We have published it that even PCB has a relation to sanity, lack of sleep, and tobacco use, steroids. So it's not exactly just a neovascular AMD. PCB may be having a little bit of a different etiology. Though they say they are variants. Some say PCB is a variant of neovascular AMD. But in many ways, the etiology is totally different. Like we see PCV patients at a much earlier age also, which is when they are in the active life, and they often tell you that they are not sleeping well, or they have certain factors for which they have to not sleeping well, and they have stress factors. And so we don't have enough time in the OPD, so we probably don't ask much. But I'm telling you, here in the class we have time. So probably you can think about it and ask your PC, because PC is very common now. Probably one reason was that we were not picking up due to not so good imaging modalities, and the fact it's basically not seen in the Caucasians. You won't get PCB in Europe and USA if you migrate. Okay, they will get anti-vaxxers. So here you will get pro-vaxxers, which everybody is taking vaccine. That's why the rates are going down, incidence of COVID. And you will get a lot of PCB. So in case you are to plan to do retina, you better know about pachychoroid disease. It's very, very common. Extremely common. Divya is here. He'll tell you how common it is. At least we see one or two cases, new ones. Because somehow we are having this, because it's a Asian and Oriental ancestry. They say it's there in China. Nobody knows anything about China. We don't know where the virus came from, COVID virus. So China is a secretive country. India is very open, which is good. It's a vibrant democracy. So India, we see it, but unfortunately, Indians are not taken on in the Everest. You are not taken on the laptop study. All these are Asian studies. Everest was done in Asia. Laptop was done in Asia. And all these studies, Indians are not taken because somehow we are more into their own political games of putting one person down and making yourself go up. So they also see all this stuff. So we scientifically are not doing so well because of many reasons. But I feel we should be having a part, we should be part of the Asian PCV group. Somebody may get in, but then it comes to, push pull wala way. I mean, how friendly you are to somebody, and so otherwise it's not based on your knowledge. Some people are there for 20, 30 years, so the same person continues till he reaches his cover. So this last thing I'll tell you, because we've got 10 minutes left, is the OCT, which is, I talked about OCT, OCTA, we are also doing IOCT, integrated OCT, even in the theatre, and it really helps. You've seen the ones who posted in section 2 or have gone through section 2. So you've got this 3D device where we have a high definition camera. That is the separate thing. That's the viewing system. If you've got an IOCT with it, you can see the OCT is actually coming onto the same screen. That's the best part of it. So you not only see it on the screen, but I see, and you'll see the 3D retina also. So you see the retina, and you can have the vertical, horizontal line superimposed to draw the vertical and the horizontal OCT. So the vertical OCT is this way, and the horizontal OCT is there. So we're going to minify this image a little bit so as to accommodate these OCT scans. So this is the intraoperative OCT, which is so just like you do a preoperative, postoperative OCT, it's a macular hole RD. So of course you can see the hole over here. So this is a macular hole RD. So something with guided atrophy or something with a large let's see. File. So okay, the next one. So it's okay, it's with a diabetic vitrectomy, and I just tell you the role of IOCT, we pull off these fibrovascular tissue. So gently, if it's not too very tightly adherent. The Gary Abrahams technique is very useful, where you have you peel off the entire hyaloid like a bent needle, if there's a hyaloid attached, so the entire tissue comes off, which is much better than doing piecemeal. But certain segmentation is required where there's a fibrovascular proliferation. FVP is very tightly adherent, then you definitely need to segment. Whereas the FVP is not tightly adherent, you can have an attempt, go at peeling gently. Because you peel gently, you literally take off everything in one go. So this is Gary Abraham's technique from Philadelphia, Wills Eye Hospital. So those people, innovate a lot. So you got to innovate. Whenever you do surgery, you can do a lot of innovation. So nowadays, a lot of talk is going on, not webinars, but talk of innovation. That how you want to innovate your thoughts into actual real time this thing. So I just want to say a last word about OCTA, how it has changed retina practice over the last few years. The workup of neovascular AMD patients is decreased number of FAICG visits, and the patient, because the thing is neovascular AMD as per the drcr.net, or which is diabetic retinopathy, but otherwise neovascular AMD, all these patients require a monthly or 6 weekly visit to some ophthalmologist. So OCTA should be there. I feel OCT itself is not enough. The OCT contributes a great deal because it picks up high flow lesions like neovascularization. And these neovascularization actually tell this to great extent whether you should inject or not inject. It's not only the fluid. So that's what I have seen in the last 2 or 3 years, that I give a lot of weightage now to OCTA, because out of experience we've seen patients who got large nets on OCTA, vascular nets, tend to bleed or they get really worse in the form of vision, the quantity of vision, quantitative loss, and the qualitative loss. The qualitative means they get a lot of metamorphosis, and they improve with the injections, because that's what we've seen. The OCTA plays a big role. So without OCTA, I wouldn't like to touch it, and wouldn't like to treat a patient with neovascular AMD or PCV. As I said, PCV is a variant of neovascular AMD or not, but both these lesions are very common. PCV more common. I would require a OCTA, otherwise I cannot intervene with a handicap. The hands are cut off. So pachychoroid disease is very, very common, and it needs OCTA. And OCTA is very, very useful. It gives you excellent quantitative and qualitative assessment of the macroperfusion. Just get an AF done with it, so as to know the number of laser spots, and you actually know where to laser. So it's something like targeted laser photocoagulation. Normally, laser should not be put into healthy retina. It's bad. When you talk about loss of contrast, loss of night vision, you can't drive after 6 p.m. because most of these laser DRs don't drive after 6 p.m. because the night vision is gone. It's kind of a nyctalopia there. And second, the accommodation is lost, the color vision is lost, goes down, not lost. The contrast is affected. The contrast getting affected is often because of laser. It's also a DR, but laser is immensely damaging. So it should be light laser, and also other day I saw Manish Nagpal's picture which is sent to ASRS, where after laser he has caused vision. So it's taken as one of the important images, but it shows an important complication of pan-retinal photocoagulation, or what we call a scatter laser. And the laser is so heavy that it causes a choroidal effusion. That's not a good thing. And I can tell you those patients' vision doesn't recover. You may go down to hand movements from probably 612, 680. So please don't go and cause choroidal effusion. You may get a good photograph on the ASRS, but no way, the patient lost his vision, he's going to be crying. You may be the happiest person with treating with heavy laser and creating a good picture. But that's not the way. You got to do very light spots and divided settings. I'm going off this thing because imaging, but laser is part of it. You should know. And MacTel, as I told you, is very easily imaged on the Opta for new vessels. It also the macula, the fovea, the multimodal, both together. So without multimodal, we are nowhere. Thank you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Any questions? Any GR, any SR?
Sir, I had a question. Sir, since we have seen that SSOCT has a lot of advantages, sir, is there any case scenario where we would still prefer SDOCT over SSOCT due to any reason, sir?
Good question, Agam. Actually, SDOCT is as good as SS. It also picks up the choroid thickness, but not so well. But SDOCT suffices in a great way. The resolution may not be so good, but it does suffice. Scan speed is lower and the resolution is lower. It's got a SLD as light source. But SDOCT, like the Spectralis, has a SD light source. The Heidelberg system has a SD light source. SD OCT. Even there, if you see the OCT, it's quite nice. So SDOCT suffices. You can easily work with the SDOCT. You may not have a SSOCT. There's slight improvement. But for every slight improvement, we don't need to have expensive machines.
Yes.
So Heidelberg has AF, it's got FA, it's got ICG, it's got OCT.
Yes, sir.
What they'll give a OCT attachment. The Heidelberg is a complete multimodal imaging machine.
All in one, yes.
All in one, right, you said. You don't need to have SSO.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pseudocysts OCT. Pseudocysts, you mean what is? Or what pseudocysts? DR and AMD. It's subfluid region, you mean what is? If you got pseudocysts, either you got cystic fluid, you have tiny cysts and all, then if the vision is less than 6/9, we like to intervene in DR or DME, center involving DME. Till 6/9, the protocol I tells you that protocol I and D that we should not give any injection because better than 6/9 vision, it is said that to observe. AMD also is a small cyst is there. Probably we won't do. We don't have to dry every part of the retina. And if there's no OCTA shows no membrane and there's no subretinal fluid, the vision is stable. We just keep following up. But you don't have to inject at every visit. So little amount of fluid, interretinal fluid, small cysts. I don't know what exactly you mean by pseudocysts, but small cysts you can just leave them alone. You know, don't get alarmed that you need to re-inject and tell the patient अभी तो एक छोटा cyst पड़ा है, अभी तो आपको और injection लगेगा नहीं. You see, check the vision. First thing, proper visual acuity assessment. Nothing replaces vision. You first have to do vision, and ideally, if you have time, I know that everybody's got limited time. Residents also will work. So, if you can get a vision check with, and then also see the OCT picture. If you get subretinal fluid in an AMD or in severe interretinal fluid which is causing a center involving DME, then only you envision less than 6/9. Then you inject. Otherwise, no. Besides that, you'll also have to ask for right blood sugar control because yesterday in the OPD, there was a patient with 400 and something Delhi police officer's father. He was looked half dead. His hemoglobin appeared to be not there because his skin was pale. So I said with 440, 50, and he's got PDR with Vitracement in one eye, other eye he's got advanced PDR. I said first you go and get his blood sugar tested and control is hypertension control is renal functions per parameters check because we are not even going to do laser for you. I said no treatment to be started for this patient until he gets a systemic workup. You got to go to have a interdepartmental, somebody has to, you have to work scientifically. The endocrinologist has to also work scientifically. So it's important that the endocrinologist checks and then only we start treatment. And then also if he's a cardiac problem, I personally feel we should get a clearance from the cardiologist for a anti-VEGF injection because the anti-VEGFs cause this thing, because vasoconstriction. Antigens have a limited role in the sense that they will cause vasoconstriction. So, patient is already having a threat of a stroke or a MI, and we need a written this thing from the cardiologist that we can give anti-VEGFs. So, basically, a good control of hypertension and generally a good control of his blood sugar and hypertension. If they're not there, the uncontrolled hypertension, we're not going to inject. No way. Even laser we wouldn't like to do because patient may collapse while you're doing laser. So don't take things lightly because medicine should be practiced very properly. Thank you. Thank you, Namrata. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. I think excellent, excellent presentation, sir, like always. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.